Do you want us to start even though your computer is not?
Sure.
Why not then? Hello, everyone. Lots to talk about. For our top story, Amazon jumps into healthcare with a telemedicine initiative. I'm really interested in that. For Archie, what's the future of housing? California desert is going to get America's first 3D printed neighborhood. What's 10% fewer labor hours and 10 times less waste. Now, on to materials. Apparently, the use of perovskite will be a key feature of the next generation of electronic appliances. And in space, people are saying, what happened to Mars water? But it's still there. And maybe this is where we find life on Mars. In environment, cheap capture is on the way. And maybe we could pay for it by carbon taxes. In biology, and this is a wow, a mouse embryo has been grown in an artificial limb. Could humans be next? And in our human story itself, Spain is going to launch the trial of a 4-day working week. How many days of a week do you people work? Anyway, and a health board, Richard is concerned about this one. Apparently, 95% of us older people are prescribed drugs that raise the risk of falling. So, Richard, what's this about our top story? That Amazon is getting into healthcare with a telemedicine initiative.
Well, I guess we were spending money that Amazon couldn't get to. And so Amazon about 18 months ago for their employees in Washington started a online health service where basically you go to your computer, you go to the site, you answer a couple of questions, and then immediately they either route you to a nurse or a nurse practitioner or a doctor. And within 60 seconds, then you are talking to the appropriate medical professional and they're starting to work on your problems. In the Seattle area, they also have coupled this with some field services, the ability to get prescriptions delivered and the ability to have a nurse come to your place and do blood tests and things like this. Now, what they're doing is by this summer, they will expand this service first to all the Amazon locations in the US. I guess they like cheap healthcare. And then they will also open it up to companies in the US as a supplemental kind of insurance benefit. And so it'll be rolled out nationwide in the US basically this summer. And so people who are presently not able to get to a doctor's office because either they can't travel or the doctor is too far away will have access to immediate professional health care, and as long as they have the internet, of course. And this is going to be a new way in getting health care. It's not done presently, but I expect it then to be connected to things like Fitbits and personal health monitoring devices, so your online health care can have 24/7 access to your basic health information. And this seems like a reasonable direction. We haven't heard yet about their using any of the AI diagnostic tools that I know exists in healthcare, but things are going to be changing. One thing that really encouraged them to move on this faster than I think they had planned was this pandemic. That in the beginning of the pandemic with their own employees, they were getting 100 calls a month. By the time the pandemic had been going on for just a few weeks, they were getting 800 calls a day. So one of the leading users, in fact, was Amazon's employees. And when the pandemic made it hard to go to the doctor, they turned to Amazon Care.
Mhm.
I would like Amazon Care. Mexico would be a great place for it because you don't need to write doctors' prescriptions.
So, any thoughts?
I
No,
think
I wonder about surgery.
Not long distance. No.
That's right. We have to wait for the meta robot.
Oh, Richard, you said if it was for people who couldn't get to a doctor or they lived in remote locations, that would be great. But I can see the future that they will, I mean, it's so cost effective, but I can see the future of them requiring people to see their doctor via the internet.
I know for me, if I could go to the computer and, get my current health question answered within a couple of minutes, that would make me real happy and not have to pay 700 pesos.
Well, I think there's a personal aspect to it. The doctor, I think they learn to intuit things about their patients.
Yes.
And I don't know if you can do that remotely.
Mhm.
Well, the thing I'm sure of remotely is they're going to have better access to your medical records than they do now.
You mean in Mexico, where they don't take any records at all?
Yeah.
Yeah, I just bought this thing on my wrist where it monitors my heart rate, my blood pressure, but the oxygen level in my blood. And as soon as I get close to my laptop, it updates that information on my laptop. I mean, it's only a short step to sending this to the clinic,
Right, of course.
Oh,
With
yeah.
the Amazon Medical, I bet it would be connected to the clinic.
Yeah. The only problem with this, though, is how do you deal with hypochondriacs? Because some people are going to be on the thing all day, aren't they?
They'll figure it out.
Yeah.
do you know what it's going to cost, Richard?
No, I
You know,
don't.
Yeah.
Again, it's being offered as a supplementary thing to your health plan. So I think the cost is not going to be high.
Right. Even if they don't succeed, Richard, I think they might come with some good ideas and to help streamline the whole system, which I think needs it badly.
In the United States.
Yeah, in the United States.
Right. And the world.
Yes, yeah.
This will work everywhere where there are people and the internet.
Well, except for the fact that they're talking about rolling it out through first Amazon employees and then other companies. And
Right.
those are the people who already have healthcare.
Right. Again,
I mean,
this is just where it begins.
Right. But
And
but
so
what is
the
needed
question is, how will we get health care in 10 years? And I bet.
This is Margot.
Hi, Margot.
Hi. I've phoned my doctor and it works out great. I don't have to get up and get all ready and go to the doctor and just get a prescription. I can phone her now. It works out. I think one of the big changes was because in Saskatchewan anyway, Canada, you had to have a doctor's appointment to get a prescription. And if it's something that you're using all the time, now they can do that by telephone. I don't
Yes.
have to go and see her, and she still gets paid. Whereas before they never got paid. So of course they wanted you to come down to the office.
Okay. Yes.
COVID changed that.
Yeah. So, and have you been looking for the water in Mars? What happened to it? Is it still there? And how about life? What's this?
Now, they, I don't know if you know this. I wasn't around, so I have to rely on other people. But 4 billion years ago on Mars, there was enough water, I mean, fluid water, to cover the whole planet from 100 to 1,000 meters deep. There was kind of enough water to fill the Atlantic Ocean. And about 1 billion years later, there was no more water. And so the question has been for a long time, what happened to all the water? And the usual answer that they gave, guessing, of course, since they hadn't been to Mars, was it must be that the low gravity on Mars let all the water evaporate. And so that was the idea really until very recently. And now with all the work that's going on with Mars, there are people who've done a new kind of study. Now, you know, water is made out of hydrogen and oxygen. We all know that. That's why they call it H2O. Now, it turns out there are 2 forms of hydrogen. There's regular old hydrogen that is more than 99% of the hydrogen in water. And then there is hydrogen with 2 protons called deuterium. And it's only a tiny percent of the hydrogen that is in water, but it is a percent. And so what these scientists figured out was they thought that the lighter hydrogen with only 1 protein would be more likely to escape Mars's atmosphere, and the heavier hydrogen would be more likely to stay on the planet. And now with the work that is done with the rovers and all of these other things, they have been in fact able to confirm that much more of the water stayed on Mars than they thought. Somewhere between 30 and 90% of the water that was on Mars 4 billion years ago is still there. Now it's in minerals and rocks and stuff like that. It's not in oceans like I first thought reading the article, but the water is there. And if we're able to figure out ways to release it from the rocks, then we're going to have basically an unlimited supply of water on Mars. So let's hear it for clever scientists who are able to use ratios of different forms of hydrogen to figure this stuff out.
So, any comments?
Well, one of the interesting thing about the that topic is the cycling of material active like the earth. A lot of their processes are one-way processes in
Right.
which, in this case, the water became hydrated with the minerals. On the earth, because of all the crustal movement and tectonic activity, our things cycle more. So we have a better chance of doing what we do.
Of getting the water back. That's exactly correct. Mars has a lot less tectonic activity. And so what gets in the rock stays in the rock.
Other thoughts? Well, then, moving on to environment. Apparently, cheaper carbon capture is on the way, and maybe we can pay for it easily with taxes on carbon. Richard, what's that about?
Now, this is really, when I studied the article, I saw that it was kind of more narrow than I thought, but specifically, what they have is a way that is now much more efficient to be able to capture CO2 out of things like power plant gases and industrial plant gases. So what they have is a new improved solvent that can dissolve the CO2 out of the exhaust gases and give you, when you take it out of the solvent, very clean CO2. You still have to do something with the CO2 to avoid putting it in the environment. So this only does a part of the problem, but this will capture carbon now out of these exhausts of things like a gas-powered plant, and it will capture it below $50 a ton. And right now, what they're talking about, what the Biden administration is talking about for a carbon tax is somewhere between $51 and $100 a ton. So I see there's starting to be a convergence between regulators' ideas of carbon taxes and how much it actually costs to be able to take the carbon out of atmosphere and exhaust gases.
So, any thoughts?
It sounds like a great idea, that's, because there's such a lot of resistance to moving away from fossil fuels completely.
Right,
Yeah.
so it's an intermediate thing. Also, part of their point about the process is this is something that can be used with existing processes and existing facilities. You don't have to change what they're trying to do to use this process. It was also interesting to me that here the first patents were filed for this kind of solvent process to remove CO2 from gases in 1930.
Yeah.
You know, so sometimes it takes a while for these ideas to come to fruition.
Well, really, this has been in use in the oil business since
Yes.
the 1930s to remove hydrogen sulfide and remove carbon dioxide from natural gas.
Right, right. And this is
it-
just a more efficient way of doing what they have been doing already.
Yeah, originally they used the simple amines, and then over the last 100 years, they've got more and more complicated amines to
Right.
achieve better performance. But you still, like you said initially, Richard, you still have to do something with the CO2 once you remove it from the solvent.
Right, which is still something that I have to say we're working on.
Yeah, once the CO2 is removed, It's readily compressed and liquefied and can be pumped into downhole salt caverns and other
Things like that.
formations
There
in
also
the earth.
are techniques to mineralize it and things like this. What I think for me, the things that are the most promising are things that are like the artificial photosynthesis, then that will take the CO2 and sunlight and turn it into something useful instead of just putting it away.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's one of these things about using wood in house construction or in building construction. The wood is the effective carbon sink, and it
Yes.
locks up the carbon for some time.
As opposed to concrete, which releases a lot of carbon when you make it.
Yeah, and that's maybe a factor in these 3D printed houses. You'd hope they're using that fancy concrete that doesn't require a CO2 release.
Right, who knows what they're using? We will find out. I think they're concerned with the fancy houses more about how fast it sets and dries.
Yeah, maybe they'll be making them out of wood chips fed through
That's
a
good.
3D printer.
That's good. That's right.
So what businesses would be taxed? You mentioned concrete. What else?
Well, anything that releases carbon would be taxed. Carbon dioxide. Anything.
And so what they're trying to do with a carbon tax is figure out ways to make the people who are putting the carbon into our environment pay for it. And there is one of the
I like that idea.
One of
Good.
the ideas that is behind that is that if the people who are the polluters have to pay for it, they will figure out how to do it less.
Exactly.
Also, there were programs of paying people who were actually absorbing carbon, like
Right.
farmers who were getting carbon credits for the carbon dioxide that their crops absorbed from the atmosphere.
And people growing forests.
Yeah.
Yes, yes. So it's one device that they're working on around the world to try to figure out ways to encourage people to use the energy more efficiently.
In Canada, we pay a carbon tax on a lot of things that you probably would not be aware of, because whoever's driving our vegetables to the grocery store, they have to pay a carbon tax.
Wow.
And
I
then-
think the carbon tax, I don't know all of how they're going to end up doing, but if there is a carbon tax, then I would suspect the carbon tax is going to be on all the fuels that are used to drive the cars everywhere.
Yes, but it's also handed down to the consumer.
Of course.
And then our government actually gives back some of that money to individuals on their income tax.
Okay.
I don't believe in an income tax or a carbon tax. I think the money should be going to the people like we're just talking about that are making advancements towards getting rid of carbon tax and dealing with it, rather than setting up this whole bureaucracy for the individuals that get money back. They don't change the way they're doing business. They're getting money back. Why would you change that? But the companies that are putting in the effort to come up with all these developments, I think they should be getting the money for their R&D.
I think the idea of giving people money back is to make it palatable to people who are against extra taxes of any kind. So if the government can demonstrate that this is really just a penalty on producers of carbon in the atmosphere, and it's not you know, and it's not a government tax grab, they might get more acceptance for it.
But
It's
have
just
you
another
taken-
way, it's another way for liberal governments to buy votes.
Could you say that again?
It's a good way for the liberal governments to buy votes. They give poor people money and then expect the poor people to vote for them because
Yeah.
of the handout.
Yes, thank you. Not many people agree with me.
If we move on to biology, is this a wow that a mouse embryo has been grown in an artificial womb? Are we next? Richard, what's that?
Now, it's kind of interesting. I recently watched a Netflix series about glass blowers, and they would give them different problems. And a woman who won one of the competitions, the problem they gave them is in glass, make something that is from 50 years in the future. And this woman made a artificial womb that a man could strap on to carry the baby. And
Did she win?
she won. She won. It was a nice job and certainly met the creative requirement that they've set in front of them. But this is a little back from there. Now researchers now have figured out how to grow mice in artificial womb for about 12 days, which is only half of the animal's natural gestation period. But this is a lot longer than they have been able to do before. And what they hope from here is that it's going to allow them to start doing the same kind of stuff with human embryos. And right now, human embryos, growing them for science is pretty limited around the world. They're only allowed to grow human embryos for science for 14 days. And they think if they can grow them for longer periods, they will be able to learn more about human growth and the development of organs and things. And they think that learning this will give them a big step forward in learning how to be able to grow organs artificially. And the people doing this work believe that lab-grown human embryos can be a great research tool and a substitute for tissue that is derived from abortions, and maybe a source for medical treatments as well. And the work creates a scientific window into the early embryo, which is presently hidden and very hard to study. So they're talking about doing this work to begin with as a basically first a scientific tool, and next as a medical tool, as a source for tissues that presently come from human embryos. One of the problems with any of this work is that this is one kind of work that there are laws against all over the world. It's presently pretty much everywhere in the world, I would guess, except China. It's against the law to try to establish a pregnancy in a human being with artificial embryos. So this kind of work is interesting scientifically, but because of the involvement in human life and the different kind of political and religious ideas about human life, it gets to be in touchy areas for a lot of people, morally and ethically. And because of that, there's all kind of legal limits on the work as well. So I still think we're a little bit away from being able to have your husband slap the man womb on around his waist and carry the baby to term, but they're working on it.
Yeah.
Any thoughts?
Well, over 30 years ago, my granddaughter was £2 when she was born, 3 months premature. And, you know, I can see this going back to where they'll have babies, they're able to save fetuses that less than £1 and things like that. And it's all possible. And, you know, the possibilities, I mean, we could, you know, once you can grow complete people, you could start growing transplant organs and things like that. But all the ethical and religious things are going to take at least a century to solve.
Woo.
Yeah.
Other thoughts? Well, we can move on then to our human story. I guess all of us are working much too much. And so now we'll work a lot less if we only have 4 days in which to do all of the many things we do. What's that about? And what's Spain doing about it?
Well, I don't know if you realize it, but about 100 years ago, Spain was one of the leaders in the world about going to a 40-hour work week. And they're at it again. And Spain, it looks like, will become one of the first countries in the world that really does a good test of the 4-day work week. And there is a government program where they've agreed to launch it and give companies incentive, that means money, to do it. And they're planning on working with around 200 companies and get 3,000 to 5,000 workers working on a 4-day work week, and then be able to measure their productivity and their happiness. And people around the world are watching this experiment. In Spain, there was one company that did that already. And what they found was that the people who were on the 4-day work week actually had higher productivity working 4 days a week than they did working 5 days a week. And of course, they were a lot happier. And the other benefit of a 4-day work week is that, you know, we burn a lot of energy, fuel, pollution going back and forth to work. And if you don't have to do it as much, you're not going to pollute the environment as much. So this is a pilot project that is going on and will be watched around the world, like all of these pilot projects on universal basic income have been going on and being watched around the world. And this is one of the, I think, harbingers of the changing future that we have right now. And like we were talking about in the beginning of this broadcast, one of the things that's going to change is the way that people work. And this is one of the early experiments.
So, any thoughts?
I think
Well,
we're
if-
already learning a lot from this period of the virus, where a lot of people are working from home. So there must be a vast amount of data available for companies to see whether people are as productive or not.
Mhm.
Yeah. You know, anything, for me, anything that recognizes the fact that we are running out of work and we need to start sharing it out better, anything that leads towards that is a good idea. The problem is these people who insist on working 60 hours a week because they want to get ahead.
Yes, I read this week that in some big banking institution, the first year financial investment employees are trying to get the company to agree to only let them work 80 hours a week.
Yeah. Any other thoughts?
And what will happen to the expression 24/7? Will be,
Well, 24/7 is going to be different shifts. I do know there was a time at National Semiconductor after I'd worked there for 7 years and had many weeks of vacation saved up, that I was in an odd job situation, and for several months I went on a 3-day-a-week work schedule, and I used my vacation days the other 2 days, and it was the best work schedule I ever had.
Yep.
And I
And
liked
you
it because I thought at 3 days a week, then there was one more day each week for me than there was for them.
When I
and
did,
probably you accomplished more too.
yeah,
That's right, until they laid me off, because obviously if I could do it 3 days a week, they wanted to have me be no days a week.
There are some positions in which it's really hard to measure productivity, though.
Yes.
I mean, it works pretty easy in production and distribution, I would imagine, but in any of the knowledge-based professions, it's really hard.
Right, well, if you're an inventor, let's see, how can you measure that, or an engineer?
You probably do an awful lot of your work in your head on your off hours too.
Some of it, if you're a programmer, they can measure with lines of code. But you're right, it's very difficult to measure this for people who are not direct labor.
I remember when I worked as an engineer, I solved a lot of problems driving the half hour from home to work.
Of
My
course,
mind was busy, and I
Of
got to work
course.
and I had solutions for
Yeah.
something.
of
and I
course.
never charged them for thinking about work when I was riding home.
Good.
Okay, then, Richard, for our last story, how come almost all of us are being prescribed drugs that raise the risk of falling and therefore of dying? What's that all about?
Well, it's just improvements in medicine, I guess. Here they did a evaluation of drugs that are given to old people in comparing 2017 with 1999. So over a 20-year period that ended recently. And what they saw was that now, at least in the US, 94% of older Americans were prescribed drugs that raised the risk of falling. And that's increased from 57% in 1999 to 94% in 2017. So a big increase in a fairly short period. Also, during that time, the rate of death caused by falls in older adults more than doubled. So more of us are falling because of the drugs that we take, and the falls are killing more of us. So some people might think that that's a problem. It turns out the particular drugs that are involved, the biggest increase was in the use of antidepressants, which apparently have an issue with falling, and the antidepressant prescriptions during this 20 period increased by a factor of 4. So that's an enormous increase. The majority of the prescriptions, though, that increased the risk of falling were drugs for high blood pressure. And if I ask here, how many people are taking drugs for high blood pressure, I bet most of the hands would go up.
Yeah.
And so I don't know what the effects are here. We did have a friend of ours here in Hehick who 2 weeks ago was talking about going to the bathroom and slipping and falling on the tiles of the bathroom and getting a severe head wound. So I see stuff like that happening around me. So far, it's not happened to me. The risk of falls has meant in the bathrooms, I have installed these grab rails. I don't know if I'll have to use them, but one of the things that I thought about in each bathroom is what if Carol and I were alone and fell, do we have a way that we can pull ourselves up after the fall? You know, these are real issues of life now. And I think the drugs that we're taking, certainly it sounds like they're not always helping us.
Now, Richard, that may be the case, but is there a trade-off? If you're going to stop having a risk of falling, are you going to be much more depressed?
Or dead of a heart attack.
Yeah. So, or are there ways of preventing those without causing a higher risk?
You know,
well, in my case, I was taking, drugs for high blood pressure, and so that was being cured. I changed that for a pacemaker. Now I'm not taking any of those drugs. That is one way, I guess, to for a trade-off.
Well, certainly some of these things, like high blood pressure, you can make headway. You can reduce your blood pressure by diet and exercise. That requires what some people hate, which is self-control.
Yeah. It's easier said than done, though. I mean, it takes a lot of willpower too.
Yes.
Yeah. I take blood pressure medication, and I have found that, yeah, my balance is not what it used to be. But I think that if you know that, then you can practice walking a straight line and things like that. The same as, if you know your eyesight's failing, you can make an effort to look at things and practice refocusing. I think it's like with vaccines, even if there are any side effects, they are nothing to worry about compared with the not taking the drug.
I had
I
a
would-
case some time ago where I had vertigo and I was
Yes.
down on the floor and I couldn't get up. And some of the medicines, not antidepressants only, but others, there's a secondary effect is vertigo, where you lose your
Yes,
balance.
yes.
Yeah.
And I don't think doctors are sensitive enough to these issues, actually. You know, and I would like to be able to talk to my doctor about it, but I think my doctor is so involved in the medical drug way of operating that it might be hard for him to think of alternatives.
Yeah,
One alternative for
I was going to say something about that.
spinach on the one hand, and to eat a lot more clams than anchovies. Will that get rid of your depression? And so you won't need to take things that cause you to fall.
Well, I know that I'm taking all kinds of drugs. I mean, you should see it about six or 7 in the morning, and 8 then I go to bed. Anyway, and I have to anyhow. It doesn't matter. But I was feeling like lightheaded a couple of months ago, and the doctor that I see here in San Antonio suggested a little pill that provides extra oxygen to the brains, and it seems to work. So I disagree with the idea that doctors, at least not all doctors, don't really give a damn.
You know, one of the questions that everybody who goes for the regular annual wellness exam at the doctors on Social Security here in the United States has to answer is how many times you've fallen or if you've fallen in the past year. So that information is tracked. So at least people should be paying attention to increases in falls. Of course, it's after that. But hopefully your doctor will do something about, you know, a little follow-up question if that number goes up or if it even exists beyond 0, rather than just filling out a blank on the paper and sending it in.
You know, at one point, I took a wonderful class. It was a balance class. And I'll tell you, even if you look up on YouTube and get a few exercises and add them to your daily routine, there's just the balance going from one leg to the other, and stuff like that. So I think there's a lot that we can do. Additionally, making sure your surroundings are safe and getting rid of all the rugs and all the stuff that they say get rid of, that's, one few
Although
other
an
things.
awful
we
lot
can
of
do.
the falls have to do with falling over pets. So
That's right.
Oh.
All right, yeah.
There's probably nothing improves your balance any more than riding a bike.
I don't know about that.
Once I fell on the pavement when I was riding my bike.
In this neighborhood, you don't want to ride a bike. Particularly if you have false teeth, because they fall out after about 10 minutes. I mean, if you want to see rough streets, you should come to our neighborhood.
Oh.
Well, Richard,
I moved to a tricycle because I felt as though my balance wasn't that good.
Yeah.
a good idea.
They're great. They're great.
That would
Great
be riding
exercise.
a bike.
Okay.
So, Richard, we're glad that your blood clot is letting you up and at 'em, and we
Good.
hope that medication for it doesn't cause you to fall. But we're really glad that you're here with us again, and thanks to everybody else for being part of this, and we'll see you next week.
See you.
I hope you
Yeah,
have a great
that's
new
great.
computer soon.
Good to see you all.
Okay, see y'all. Take
Take
care.
care.
Adios.
Take care, Richard.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Richard.